Spoiler alert. In this show, we talk about Ted Lasso and the show's characters. Welcome to Big Boss Biscuits, the podcast where we have honest conversations about leadership, the wins, the failures, and everything in between. My hope is that every episode inspires leaders to step up, invest in themselves as much as they invest in the business and the people, and create workplaces where people can truly thrive. Because that's a hill I will die on. Better leaders build better teams, better organizations, and ultimately a better world. So it's easy to look at someone like Brandon Lee and assume leadership came naturally. He has built 4 companies, helped scale a startup from employee number 1 through acquisition, created a personality assessment that's helping people build more fulfilling careers, and reached millions through his writing and speaking. From the outside, his story looks like one success after another, but that's not the story we're telling today. Brandon is remarkably honest about the leader he was in his 20s. Highly driven, relentlessly focused on results, and almost completely unaware of the maybe even toxic impact he was having on the people around him. He lost teammates he cared about, friendships even. He received then feedback that stung, and like so many of us, he realized something that's rarely talked about. We're seldom given the skills to lead ourselves well, let alone lead other people. And what makes Brandon's story so powerful isn't that he eventually became a better leader. It's how he got there. Through difficult feedback, through emotional intelligence work, through learning to listen instead of defend, to stay curious instead of certain, and to understand that leadership is every bit as much about relationships as it is about results. One of Brandon's core values is incrementalism, the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things by taking one step forward at a time. I think that's exactly what leadership development looks like. It isn't a personality trait. It isn't something you're born with. It is a willingness to keep learning, to question yourself, to admit when you have caused harm, and to choose growth over ego again and again. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with Brandon. There aren't enough leaders talking openly about the people they disappointed, the mistakes they've made, or the beliefs they had to unlearn. Yet those are often the stories that teach us the most. My hope with Big Boss Biscuits is to create more of these conversations, ones that are honest enough to make us reflect, vulnerable enough to make us feel less alone, and practical enough to help us become better leaders and better human beings. So if you've ever wondered whether people can truly change, or whether it's possible for you to become the leader you wish you'd been years ago, I think you're going to love this conversation. You're going to find hope and inspiration from Brandon's stories. So grab your biscuits and let's get into it. A lot of leaders start their leadership path with very minimum understanding of what good leadership looks like. A lot of us make mistakes, and a lot of us don't know how to lead until someone points it out to us. And often we lack good leaders. What happened to you when you started being a leader and being responsible for other people?
When I first started in my career, I was not very nurturing. I was pretty cold. I got a lot of feedback that I was not giving enough encouragement, enough acknowledgement. People told me that I was a rock. And so I think people respected me, but maybe they didn't like me or didn't feel psychologically safe around me. And yeah, that was hard to hear at the time. And there were times that I didn't even want to hear it.
When you think back to those times, what were your role models for leadership that you were that kind of cold or uncaring leader?
I think I was looking at a lot of men. I actually had gone through leadership classes and read leadership books. I even read Maxwell's stuff. A lot of it was around direction and confidence and less about how to be nurturing and how to be a good manager, how to help other people rise up. And not a lot of it was about the ego development and around humility and listening and feedback. So I did have role models, but they weren't complete. And it wasn't until I got older and got exposed to other source material that I was like, oh, my picture of what a leader is very limited. And now I'm getting a fuller picture. And so maybe now I have something else to strive for and something else to learn and incorporate.
If you were to go back to those times and look at yourself from a outsider perspective or someone who you managed, how would you have described you as a leader other than cold or not nurturing?
I would describe myself as someone who is more task focused than relationship focused. Just so consumed by performing well that I wasn't really paying much attention to the people around me and therefore putting the same amount of thought into the people as my work. That's probably how I would sum it up in most of my early career. I just didn't have that focus, nor think that it was a priority.
You know, there are so many young leaders or leaders who share that at the beginning they were focused mainly on the output, the outcome, numbers, results, and didn't think to care about people. Where does it come from? That kind of mentality.
Where does that come from? I don't know if I can comment on the broad dynamic, but I can say for me, I think it's partly like the immigrant perspective that my parents taught me in terms of both a byproduct of focusing on what they did teach me and then the omission of what they did not teach me. So the focus of what my parents taught me was just get straight A's, do a good job. Like you need to be responsible for the work and assignments that you're given and do that well. That was their predominant focus. And that, in my mind, bled over into how I handled work. And completely missing from that was the social aspect of, at least in the corporate workspace, it's now more about politics and whatnot, but just the general trend of minding the relationships, minding colleagues and having good relationships with people that I'm working with. That was just nowhere in any of their guidance. And so as a result of omission, I just never thought that it was important. And so personally for me, it was simply not having parents that nudge me in directions, not having peers that nudge me in that direction, not having teachers that nudge me in that direction. It was really just trial and error.
How did that kind of leadership style translate to the people around you? So you eventually you started to get feedback, and then based on that, you started to evolve as a leader. Back then, if I were to sit in one of your one-on-ones, what would I have seen? What kind of leader would I have?
In real action. In a meeting, I'm just focused on the tasks. I'm just focused on here's what happened, here's what needs to happen. Update me on the things that you were responsible for. Why didn't it happen? Cool, let's problem solve it. I'm laser focused on this external thing, the task, and not really putting any brain capacity towards the dynamic. Like, how is this landing on the other person? How are they feeling about it? How might they be perceiving my words? How might this be affecting our relationship? It would almost be that you are an information delivery mechanism. I wouldn't really see you as a human. I'd be in this conversation to extract updates from you and to upload new updates to you so that you can go off and do your own thing.
Would you say in this show, in the Ted Lasso show, not quite as bad as Nate, but close to? Because Nate was really about the outcomes, the performance, winning. There was a lot of ego in Nate,
Mm,
but he didn't really see behind that. When he moved from AFC Richmond to join, I think, Manchester United, he didn't care about his team members.
mm. Yeah.
And I don't want to say you were toxic like Nate, but is that similar? Because Nate was a young leader. He was new to leadership.
Yeah, I would say my journey did rhyme with Nate quite a bit in that early in my career or just in high school, I was that nobody. I didn't think much of myself. And I really only climbed into a position of leadership and influence because other people believed in me. So I fortunately had my own versions of Ted Lassos in my life who believed me before I believed in myself. And that was when and they helped me blossom in my own confidence, kind of like Nate. I mean, he's actually a close friend. He basically saw greatness in me before I ever saw it in myself. And I remember being very much Nate, just cautiously and nervously offering my ideas, not thinking that they were good ideas, only for my Ted Lasso equivalent to be like, whoa, that was amazing. That's great. You should do more of that. And kind of blossoming under that. But yeah, I don't think I became the active asshole. It makes me think about when Nate was on the other team and on one of the first few practices, he was like, stand on this box. This is the dummy box. So I don't think I got as brutal as that, but definitely the theme of to what you just mentioned, I was much more focused on doing well rather than thinking about the people around me. I don't think I was so overly consumed with the ego aspect and worrying so much about how other people felt about me. I remember Nate would often read the news and think about the dynamics that were playing out politically between him and Ted early on in terms of what the press were saying. And that was me less so in that I was much more, again, focused on the task, focused on finding my sense of self.
What impact had your leadership style at the beginning on your team and the company?
So I would say there are two companies in which I really was part of that early stage of being a leader. First, I was in real estate. So I used to flip houses. And there were three friends that actually worked with me. And I was just a very poor leader in hindsight. One of them expected me to be more warm and maintaining a more nurturing standpoint because we were friends before. He expected that friendship to translate over. And because I was so busy, I was so stressed, so focused, that to change the tone from that warm friendship to cold manager, he ended up getting pretty disgruntled, frustrated, and disappointed in who I was. I basically used to mentor him and taught him so much. And it basically went from someone that he really respected to someone that he was disappointed by. So he ended up leaving. The other one of them, he was my co-founder in real estate, and I expected him to be all in and invested the way that I was. And when he seemed that he wasn't, just there's a lot of frustration, disappointment, and anger, and probably some bits of resentment slowly building that I didn't know how to recognize within myself. And because I didn't know how to recognize it within myself, I didn't know how to communicate it in a way that would land well. I didn't know how to voice it. I kind of just kept it all in, and then it would eventually bleed out in moments that I couldn't really predict. I think I got probably passive aggressive at moments with him and not really being conscious that that was happening. So that pushed him away and he ended up leaving as well. That was the most concrete one where absolute failure of leadership could have been prevented. And if I had the awareness and skills that I have now, I probably wouldn't have done it that way. Maybe that relationship would have been better.
I'm so appreciative that you're willing to open up about it because so many of us leaders are afraid of admitting when we mess up or the
Mhm.
things that we did at the beginning. So much of leadership is not just natural skill set. It's not that we're born natural leaders. We may have a good inclination for it. I don't know, good extrovert skills, you name it, right?
Mhm.
But I firmly believe that leadership is a skill that is trained
Mhm.
and role modeled, and we need mentors and
Agree.
other
Mhm.
good leaders above us or with us who can show us the way. In your case, did you have those wake up moments because people left or you saw the impact on your team? Or was it because someone started to point it out to you, other than your direct reports giving you feedback? Like,
In that first phase of real estate, I didn't get the memo. I was disappointed, man, like these people left. Oh, I can't rely on them. And so I made it about me and the work rather than a reflection of how could I have done differently as a leader. Symptomatic of that was just me still being really focused and busy with hitting our company goals. And so I didn't really pause to reflect in that moment. And they didn't give that direct feedback. So there was really not that pause point. It was more in the next venture when I was running a education company for teens. My co-founder and I, he was similarly invested in personal growth. And I think he has much more natural capacity in leadership on the nurturing side than I do. And we were hosting basically a company retreat. And part of that was a feedback exercise. And so we all wrote on Post-it notes, feedback for everyone. And then it comes my turn. So I'm just starting to read the feedback. And the consistent theme was people saying that they wish that I acknowledged other people more. And that was probably the first time I really got direct feedback as a leader about how to improve.
prior to that, had you ever considered asking for feedback?
I didn't really put serious energy into my leadership growth. Probably not until I guess my late 20s. Like, I think I had casually read books here and there, but I wasn't in the right time and place to actually apply it. And so it wasn't until my late 20s, which is after getting this feedback from my team.
You mentioned also awareness. You didn't have the awareness to that could have helped you to prevent people leaving the company. Emotional intelligence is such a big aspect of good leadership.
hmm
Self awareness is part of emotional intelligence. What started happening for you to develop yourself as a leader further?
I would say there's two phases. When I was in my mid 20s, around 25, 26, I met someone who I don't know if you heard about this program at Stanford called Touchy Feely. Stanford apparently has their MBA program. They have this class. It's actually called Interpersonal Dynamics. It's more colloquially known as Touchy Feely. And my friend is a trained facilitator for that class. In his words, he calls it at Stanford, they teach MBAs how to cry because it's basically teaching MBAs how to access their feelings and have like attuned to their own emotions and other people's emotions and really develop and focus that muscle of speaking interpersonally and speaking emotionally. And because of his recommendation, I went through their training program their facilitator training program. It's like an intensive over a weekend, and I went through that twice. That experience was one of the most pivotal in terms of really opening my eyes to see the world of emotional communication that I had been completely oblivious to. Its emotions are in English, but it felt like I was learning another language going through those two trainings, and just being in a room of 12 other people who are facilitators. Most of them were much older, I would say in their 40s, and had a lot more life experience and other kind of personal growth experience. It was like watching someone who only knew one or two sentences in Spanish and be in a room with native born Spanish speakers and just watching how fast they speak, how fluid, they're not even thinking about the language, but they're speaking in a different language. And I'm like taking notes about vocab and sentence structure. So that was like the emotional equivalent. So that was probably the most important foundations that I picked up. And so thank you for my friend for putting me in the direction. That laid a really powerful foundation to even have that level of awareness. So even me describing the resentment or anger that I had at my friend back in my early 20s, I wouldn't even have words for that if it weren't for this class. And I'm using words now that I wouldn't have been able to label it if you asked me back then. Tying it back to the education company, when my team gave me that feedback, I had already taken that class. So I processed it, sat with it, and I was both shocked at their feedback, shocked and not shocked. Shocked because it was more the fact that everyone had agreed with that feedback. So this was not like a one off. It was grief there and this frenetic angst all happening at the same time. And what ended up happening was I started sharing that I hear this feedback. I'm happy to work on this. And if I think about why this is hard for me to act on and why there's a sadness bubbling up in me, is because I feel like it's hard to give what I do not have myself. And I ended up sharing that being the full-time founder on this project, there's a lot of hidden labor that I'm doing all the time and no one sees it. No one acknowledges it. And so I feel like all my work is invisible and taken for granted to a certain extent. So I ended up sharing it's really hard to give acknowledgement when I feel such a like empty dearth of that. I feel such deficit with that. And I ended up crying. That was like the first time I could really deeply reflect about it. That was a really powerful moment for the team and also for me.
You're sharing something really powerful and emotional. I would love to hear a little bit more about what you shared, grief. What exactly were you grieving?
Mm. If I go back, I think part of it was one grief in myself that I wasn't the flawless leader that I tried to be. I created disappointment in people that I care about and enjoyed working with, and grief that there's this pitifulness about the situation of like felt broke, like not in financially broke. I felt like affirmation broke, and it just felt like such a pitiful situation. I didn't realize that I needed some level of affirmation because I think up to that point I had historically operated on very little affirmation. At any point did I ever realize that maybe I needed that. And so I think there's a grief that, oh shoot, I've been wrong about how important affirmation is even within myself.
You also touch on an aspect of leadership that not many talk about, which is this need for affirmation or positive reinforcement, even acknowledgement of the things
Hmm.
that we do. I agree
Yeah.
with you. In
Hmm.
the several leadership positions I've had, it's often this hidden work that we do
Yeah.
that people don't realize that it's happening. And it can be subtle. It's not just the behind the scenes work. It's not just like the documents that we write when we don't have meetings. It's so much more. It's sometimes it's the books we read, it's the lessons we go to, the coaching that we take, the therapy we take. It's the crying after a heavy work day, like all these things are part of leadership that is
Hmm.
just not visible and not seen.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from your perspective if there's anything we as leaders can do to change that systemic.
It's a really good question. And I think my go to answer for years around that has been around peer groups for leaders. Because I think fundamentally, as a leader, when you're put in a leadership position, there's a weightiness that comes. You're now much more responsible for many more outcomes, and you have less capacity to blame because well, you're the leader, right? And so with that weightiness comes a lot more thinking on and off hours around how to make best of the situation and help your org or mission thrive. And so until you've experienced that chronically and lived through that, it's hard to comprehend what that's like. Unless you've been through, you don't know what that's like. And so, in my mind, the best people who are able to meet that acknowledgement, that vacuum in a way that doesn't feel artificial or contrived or just going through the motions is when other leaders do it. That's actually what happened when I was at my last company. I was employee number one. The first time I was working under someone else, the founder and the CTO. And I basically played that role because I had been a founder multiple times before that. I was fortunate enough to basically be the support person that I wish I used to have, which is someone who's been in that leadership position, sees the leadership decisions that are happening right now in front of me and providing that acknowledgement. And so I think founder leader peer groups are probably one of the most prime ways to do that. Most of my close friends are also leaders. My closest friend is the founder of a company. Another close friend is an executive director of a nonprofit. And so there's always this immediate unspoken, like, yeah, I get the pressure that you're facing. I get all the work that you're doing. And so spaces that I create for myself have addressed that. And I think that's probably what a lot of leaders are missing is they don't necessarily go out of their way to find something like that. That's probably why they're missing that. So in my mind, that's the most sustainable way to create that. Because I don't know, anytime you do like a top down thing for any segment of people, it's just harder to address the gap. But the moment that you can create decentralized process for that to happen, which is peer networks, that increases the odds of us actually systemically addressing the issue.
It sounds like you have your own diamond dog group around you that supports you
Yeah. Mhm.
professionally, but also as your friends. And now, once you've had the awakening moment, the feedback, the emotional breakthrough, the realization that you aren't the leader you thought you were, wanted to be. How did you start changing and what did you observe in your team and in your environment in general as you were changing and becoming a better?
In that specific instance with the education company, I remember trying to put an earnest effort into that, but I don't know how well I did. I never got the second round of feedback around like how people feel. We didn't do the second retreat because we ended up shutting the company down. In hindsight, I think I only put maybe like a C plus effort in actively changing that. Partially because of the stresses of just being so early stage. It wasn't until my late 20s where a friend of mine asked if I wanted to join a book club to go through a book called Commitments of Conscious Leadership. There are 15 Commitments is great in that they have a website, and for every single chapter, they also have training videos, they have a worksheet. And so it's very practical. It was literally written for the work environment. So in going through this book, the whole point was to embody this book. And so given everything that I've already shared, and this is the chance to really actively level up and ingrain some of these principles in my life so that I can actually be a better leader. And so basically for almost 2 years, I was in a weekly group to practice a lot of these concepts from the book. Some really potent themes from the book was called taking full responsibility. And another was about being curious and open. Another chapter was about feeling on your feelings. Another about candor. Another about genius. I think each chapter in of itself could have been a book. So there's like 15 different things that they boil down really concisely and make it practical about how to practice that. I would say that did the most for me as a leader.
And what was the impact on the team, on your teams, and how is it now?
When I went through that, that was when I was employee number one. I was more of a peer to most people than a manager. So it wasn't really until my current role now, running my own company, where I've really been able to apply all that. Oh man, I think I'm just a fundamentally different person. And also, this might be a separate point, but related is I think relationships, romantic relationships are also really proving ground for these same skills as well. And so my current girlfriend and I have done a lot of active practice with each other, knowing that there's other gaps that we wanted to work on. So I'd say right now, the impact is that I am much more proactive to recognize shifts in me, like concerns or frustrations or worries when they are small, like before they get big, before they get problematic. Definitely would not say I'm world class, but compared to where I began, way further ahead. So I'm much more able to label, oh, this feels slightly off. And I'm able to bring it up in a way that makes it easy for the other person to hear, to make the other person not feel like they're being blamed. Here are some like stories and rationales that I have around why this might be happening. I'm open to them being wrong. So labeling things sooner, bringing it up in thoughtful, diplomatic ways that land well, and then leading a collaborative discussion to find a middle ground in such a way that both people feel heard, feel understood, and feel like their wants are acknowledged and met moving forward. So I think that as the skill set points to a lot of competencies underneath, but those are things that I feel far more comfortable doing.
Your story resonates so much with my story. When I started in leadership positions, I was, I don't know, my mid-20s, and I was bad, really bad. I didn't
Mhm.
know how to communicate. That's something my parents never taught me. It's not necessarily something that you are taught in school, not even in university. You're being taught so many other things except things that can help you in the workplace.
Mhm.
So, same, I had to go through all those lessons and failures to learn and adapt and improve from there. And it's also interesting to hear from you that once you started to invest in those skills like self awareness, awareness of where the other is, and then the communication style, being able to label and say, there's something off, let's talk about it before it blows up. I had the same. At some point, I realized, okay, I cannot continue on this path. I am really fucking up as a leader and I'm messing up my team members and I'm traumatizing when I don't want to. So, what do I need? In my case, I got an executive coach and through that coaching, I learned to communicate. Also, I was able to translate that into my marriage. And we are now in such a better relationship because I'm able to say, this didn't sit well. Let's talk about it rather than like letting it fester and escalate. And it's so transferable. When you think about your learning curve, what was the toughest part for you to learn as a leader?
Man, I think the toughest has been being okay with others' emotion. I think that I've had a framework for a very long time that there's a set of good emotions and a set of bad emotions. And being a good friend or a partner or a person in general is not making you feel bad. I had this script that if I made you feel bad, then I am bad. And the consequence of that was that if I made you feel bad, then I need to fix it. I need to make sure that you don't feel bad because of some action that I did. For me, it was true in such a way that it was reflexive and fierce and identity based. It was like, I'm a good person, so you cannot feel bad. I'm not allowed to let you feel bad because if you feel bad, then I'm not a good person. And this is all happening, obviously, in the subconscious. But the output is that I get really attached to making sure that the feeling is gone, making you feel better in such a way that, that's well intentioned, but that's not necessarily what is needed in the moment often. I think in my understanding now, emotions are meant to be understood and heard. They're not meant to be fixed. And the way that you actually fix emotions is actually to hear them. And because emotions just want to be validated, they want to be acknowledged, they want to be aired out and held and understood. And in the understanding and hearing, then the actual the that's how you metabolize the emotion. That's how the emotion goes away and the intensity of it and fierceness of it, the edginess of it dissolves. And then we can talk about the functional problem. But what is the situation that actually caused it and maybe how we can address it. But if we want the feeling to go away, we have to first understand it. And the other person is the arbiter of whether it is understood, is the person who's feeling it, right? If they don't feel understood, they will continue to feel that way. And so that's the real judge. And so that was one of the biggest things to unravel for me because I didn't realize how so ingrained it was for me being a good person, being a good guy. And therefore, no, you're feeling bad. I'm a bad guy. So like is untangling that. That was probably a lifelong decades of programming there. And so I literally took, I would say, 3 years to really investigate that and literally practice being a bad guy, practice being like with friends in like a personal growth context where it's like hearing other people have emotions as a result of my own actions, regardless of whether they were interpreting me correctly or not, whether they understood my intention or not, whether they misread me or not, didn't matter. I needed to be able to stand in the heat of what someone was emotionally feeling, even if I disagreed with their facts. I needed to be able to sit in that and not be reactive and be able to hold this divide this tension between what I believe to be the true facts of the situation versus their experience of what the facts are and what their emotions are currently saying. I need to be able to separate that, hold both of them at the same time, and not allow this wanting to have align facts on both sides, not prevent that side from driving the conversation, because that's really counterproductive when someone is experiencing strong feelings. So having a lot of practice there, I think that was the hardest because it went so deep into my psyche in terms of how I saw myself, identified, and how I was trained to understand the world of emotion growing up, and just like as we've already been talking about, the lack of leaders and lack of modeling. But that translates into every kind of leadership dynamic. And there's a lot of downstream consequences with that in a really good way.
You're inspiring. Also, not only are you a real life example of how you can change, and that just because we were raised or we didn't have the right role models or didn't learn from the beginning how to be good at something, in this case, leadership, we can change as long as we invest in ourselves. And you give a lot of hope that it is possible. So I really appreciate that you shared all of this with me. When you now think and look at your team and team dynamics and the companies that you're leading, how does a human centered approach translate into having the right outcomes for your teams?
I mean, this is just all inference because I don't have real data, but the hope is that people feel more seen, people feel more engaged, people feel like I actually care about who they are and the work that they do. Yeah, I hope that I'm more human than than I used to be. Hopefully, people feel more engaged and they feel like they are actually valued as people. So, therefore, enjoy working here more so than maybe other environments.
I'm pretty sure that's the case because there is a lot of data, maybe not directly with your company, but about when people are treated well at work, when they're being developed and invested in, that translates to higher engagement, better performance, better numbers, better business, you know? And
Yeah,
so I'm pretty sure that that's the case with you.
yeah.
Brendan, I really appreciate you opening up about your path, being honest, how you went about your learning curve and sharing it.
I think it this kind of content needs to be more out there. I'm partly here, partially because I wish there was more like that. I wish I could listen to more podcasts with leaders sharing with this level of candor. So yeah, happy to be part of it. Yeah.
So now that you've gone through this learning path, you came to understand better the needs of your teams and that there's a big part of a healthy and happy work relationship when someone finds purpose in their work. And it led you to where you are now.
Yeah, so this whole thread around how has all this work helped me become a better leader and the impact of that. One other way that I actually demonstrate that is I built a personality test company. And the whole premise of the personality test that I built is around understanding what you enjoy. And so much of work and how most people approach their careers is actually about what I do a lot. What am I good at? But you can actually be really good at things that you don't enjoy. You can be good at things that drain you. Like for me, I can do sales because I did sales in real estate, but I dread it. It's so costly and expensive and I don't really want to do it, but I'll do it if I have to. And I think that's a relationship that a lot of people have with work is they do it because it pays the bills, not because they enjoy it. And so when I onboard team members, often include in my process them taking the assessments that I built because it gives me a better picture of what they enjoy. And often it gives them a better awareness of what they enjoy. And it just helps jumpstart the conversation around who are you actually as a person from an enjoyment standpoint, and how can we design work? Given that I run this company, we can design work however we want. And so maybe we can design work to be much more friendly to your genius because the calculus behind that partly is when you do things that you enjoy, it doesn't drain you as much. It feels easier and you can do it longer because it's feeding you rather than draining you. And so therefore they can do that more. So if we can find the intersection of things that you enjoy and things that align with company priorities, then that's a huge win for everyone. And so it just gives me that much more insight and an easy starting point in conversation to show my team that, hey, I truly am wanting you to help live your best professional life and not to drain you and not burn you out. And here's a tool that can help with that. That's another concrete example of how I've helped people see that I care about them, their journey, their growth, and who they are as a human and how they're wired.
What I love about that personality test, and please share where we can find it and where people can do it or team leaders use it as another tool.
Mhm.
is that it's not just about who are you as a person, because all the others are like, oh, you're very direct or you're very whatever, compassionate. Well, it's like, okay, great. Thank you. What do I do with that? That doesn't help me be more engaged at work. It helps someone understands my personality better. But this personality test, from what you're sharing, is about taking your passion, what you're good at, and helping you do more of it so that you can have a fulfilled life while also having a good and fulfilling career. So yes, please share with us how people can find.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. No one's ever said that, but you're totally right. A lot of assessments are about who you are interpersonally, like how you can get managed better, and it's really interpersonal. And that, yeah, you're right. That is only half the picture. It's missing a lot. And so, yeah, if people are interested, they can take the assessment at geniusofyou.com, geniusofyou.com.
And that's a wrap on today's Big Boss Biscuits batch. Thanks for spending this time with me. Whether you're commuting, folding laundry, or maybe pretending to work while you listen, and hey, no judgment, we all do this. It means a lot that you take the time to invest in yourself. So if today's conversation hit home, don't just sit there with your feelings and thoughts alone. Come say hi. Find me on Instagram at kirsten.penalosa. Connect with me on LinkedIn, just find my name, or swing by kirstenpenalosa.com. And here's the real thing. I'm a leadership and performance coach, and I help humans go from surviving leadership to certified badass leader status. And if you're the one running the whole show, I'm also an organizational consultant. I partner with companies to build workplaces so good, other companies get a little jealous. So go on, be a badass today. And grab your biscuits again next time. Until then, I'm your host, Kirsten Penalosa, and this has been another episode on your Ted Lasso-inspired Big Boss Biscuits podcast.